Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. On December 18th, 2022, the World Cup final in Qatar came to an end. Lionel Messi and Argentina had defeated France, finally lifting the trophy they had spent decades chasing. Across the pitch, Argentine players were crying, embracing their families, and holding their medals tightly against their chests. This was their night. It belonged to the players, the coaches, and the families who had sacrificed everything to reach that moment. But in the middle of the celebrations, a man who was neither an Argentine player nor a member of the coaching staff suddenly appeared in front of the cameras. He grabbed Messi by the arm and tried to stop him for a photograph. He held the World Cup trophy, kissed it, and posed beside the players. At one point, he even performed a gesture the entire world recognized as, though he were, about to sprinkle salt over the most famous trophy in sports. That man was Nusret Gökçe, better known as Salt Bae. For years, that simple gesture had brought football stars, celebrities, billionaires, and wealthy tourists into his restaurants. But on this particular night, the same gesture produced a completely different reaction. People were no longer amused. They were angry. After the final, FIFA acknowledged that people had gained improper access to the pitch and began investigating how they had entered the celebration area. The original World Cup trophy is not an ordinary prop. Only a limited group of people are normally permitted to touch it, including winning players, former champions, and heads of state. So, how did a Turkish butcher's apprentice, who had left school as a child, end up standing at the center of the greatest celebration in world football? How did an ordinary steak become a luxury product worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars once it passed through his hands? And why did a man who once entertained the entire internet eventually begin to irritate it? Today, we are going to tell the story of Salt Bae. But this is not simply the story of a chef who became famous. It is an experiment in social media, celebrity worship, luxury consumption, and the dangerous moment when online attention begins to feel like real status. Salt Bae's real name is Nusret Gökçe. According to the story presented by his restaurant brand, he was born into an ordinary family in Erzurum, Turkey. His father worked as a miner. Because the family had very little money, Nusret left school after the 6th grade and began working as an apprentice in a butcher shop in Istanbul. From the age of 13, he spent most of his days surrounded by meat. At first, he handled cleaning, carrying, and basic preparation. Only later was he trusted with a knife and allowed to cut the meat himself. For a child with little education, no family wealth, and no celebrity connections, the butcher shop seemed to represent the limits of his world. But Nusret appears to have understood something very early, knowing how to cut meat would not be enough to change his life. He later traveled to countries known for their beef culture, including Argentina and the United States. There, he studied different methods of butchering, cooking, presenting, and serving meat. He then brought those ideas back to Turkey. In 2010, Nusret and his partners opened the first Nusret restaurant in Istanbul. It was a small operation, reportedly beginning with just 10 tables and 10 employees. The menu was not especially complicated. The business was built around beef, but from the very beginning, Nusret did something differently. He did not remain hidden in the kitchen. He walked to the tables, sliced the meat in front of customers, arranged it dramatically, and turned service into a performance. Long before he became a global internet celebrity, he had already discovered his most important advantage. There were thousands of chefs who could cook a steak. There were far fewer who could transform cutting a steak into a live show. The moment that completely changed his life arrived in 2017. A short video was uploaded to social media. In the clip, Nusret wore a tight white shirt and round sunglasses, with his hair carefully slicked back. He rapidly sliced through a large steak. Then he picked up a pinch of salt, bent his wrist, and allowed the grains to fall from his fingertips onto his forearm before scattering onto the meat below. It looked partly like seasoning and partly like the final move in a magic trick. The video quickly attracted millions of views. The internet gave him a new name, Salt Bae. Why did such a simple gesture become a global phenomenon? Because it contained almost everything a short-form video needed. First, it was extremely easy to understand. Viewers did not need to know anything about different cuts of beef. They did not need to understand cooking temperatures or professional knife techniques. Within a few seconds, anyone could see what was happening. A man was sprinkling salt in an unusual way. Second, the image was instantly recognizable. The sunglasses, the tight shirt, the black glove, the bent wrist, the salt falling down his arm. Any one of these details could remind viewers of Salt Bae. Most importantly, the gesture was easy to imitate. Footballers could copy it after scoring a goal. Actors could perform it on television. Ordinary people could recreate it at dinner. Once people around the world began repeating the same gesture, Nusret stopped being merely a restaurant owner. He became a symbol of internet culture. But creating a successful meme was not his greatest achievement. His greatest achievement was turning that meme into a business. Many people become famous online and then struggle to work out what they can actually sell. Salt Bae had the opposite advantage. Before the viral moment, he already owned restaurants. When the attention arrived, he did not need to invent a product. He simply redirected that attention toward Nusret. Soon, celebrities, athletes, business leaders, and wealthy tourists began visiting his restaurants. Customers were not coming only to eat steak. They wanted Salt Bae to appear beside their table. They wanted him to slice the meat, raise his arm, and repeat the gesture they had already watched hundreds of times on their phones. Once the moment was recorded and uploaded, the customer could tell the world, "I met Salt Bae. I went to the restaurant where celebrities eat. I entered the same world as football stars, actors, and billionaires. I became part of the viral moment. That is why Salt Bae was never really selling only beef. He was selling participation. He was selling spectacle. He was selling social status. And above all, he was selling the experience of being personally served by a famous man. Nusret itself has promoted its restaurants as more than places to eat. The brand emphasizes atmosphere, tableside performance, and a multi-sensory dining experience. That was the most intelligent part of Salt Bae's business model. Traditional steakhouses compete through meat quality, cooking technique, wine, service, and reputation. Nusret turned the steakhouse into a theater. The steak was the price of admission. Salt Bae was the performer on stage. The gold-covered steak took that logic to its most extreme form. Edible gold does very little to improve the actual taste of beef, but it looks spectacular on camera. An ordinary steak may disappear into someone's social media feed without attracting attention. A giant tomahawk, covered in gold, however, immediately stops people from scrolling. At the now-closed Beverly Hills location, a gold-covered tomahawk steak was reportedly priced at around $950. Other oversized gold steaks at Nusret restaurants have carried prices of $1,500 or more. Anyone paying that amount was obviously buying more than protein and fat. They were buying a photograph. They were buying a video. They were buying the ability to tell other people, I ate Salt Bae's gold steak. In the language of modern marketing, they were buying social currency. But this business model contained a serious weakness. When customers are paying mainly for the performance, how important is the food itself? When Nusret opened in New York in 2018, several American critics gave the restaurant harsh reviews. Some complained that the steaks were tough or lacked flavor. Others argued that the quality of the meal did not justify the extraordinary prices. One restaurant critic reached a particularly revealing conclusion. As a conventional steakhouse, Nusret might disappoint. As a form of dinner theater, it could make sense, but only if Salt Bae himself was actually there. That observation exposed the greatest weakness of the celebrity restaurant. A strong traditional restaurant should not depend on its owner standing beside every table. Even when the famous chef is absent, the kitchen system, ingredient standards, and service structure should continue to deliver a consistent experience. Salt Bae's restaurants faced a different problem. A significant part of the high price was connected to the possibility of seeing him in person. When he was not there, the most important product appeared to be missing. His personality was therefore both the brand's greatest asset and its greatest risk. Could one man appear in Istanbul, Dubai, London, New York, Miami, and Los Angeles at the same time? Of course not. As the restaurant chain expanded, Salt Bae could only physically appear in one location at any given moment. The other branches were left to answer a difficult question. Without the famous gesture, was the steak itself still worth the price? The turning point in Salt Bae's public image arrived during the 2022 World Cup final. Inside his own restaurant, Salt Bae could be the center of attention. Customers had paid to watch him perform, but a World Cup final was not his restaurant. The Argentine players had spent their lives working toward that victory. The cameras should have belonged to them, their coaches, and their families. Yet Salt Bae followed the same instincts that had made him successful. When he saw a celebrity, he wanted a photograph. When he saw a camera, he wanted to perform. When he saw global attention, he wanted to place himself at the center of it. Footage from the celebration showed him repeatedly trying to attract Messi's attention. At one point, he reached out and grabbed Messi's arm. He later touched and kissed the trophy and posed with several Argentine players. This time, viewers did not find him entertaining. The context had changed. Inside a restaurant, his confidence was part of the show. On the World Cup pitch, the same behavior looked intrusive. Salt Bae's greatest mistake may not have been simply touching the trophy. It was believing that internet fame granted him access to every important moment. He had forgotten that celebrities visiting his restaurant did not automatically make him part of their achievements. And he had forgotten that one of the most powerful forms of social intelligence is knowing when not to step in front of the camera. The World Cup controversy did not destroy his business overnight. Nusret did not disappear. The company has continued to operate restaurants across several countries, which shows that the concept still has a market. But the brand has experienced clear contraction in the United States. The Beverly Hills restaurant closed in 2025. The Las Vegas location had already ended operations. At one point, Nusret had several restaurants across the United States. By mid-2025, its American presence had reportedly been reduced mainly to New York and Miami. This does not mean that Salt Bae completely failed, but it does show that novelty cannot expand forever. The first time a gesture appears, it feels creative. After 10 appearances, it becomes a signature. After 100 appearances, it may begin to feel repetitive. Salt Bae's experience reveals the central problem faced by almost every influencer-driven business. Attention can create enormous price premiums in a very short period of time. But attention does not automatically become a lasting competitive advantage. A customer may visit once to see the salt gesture. They may return a second time to bring friends. But by the third or fourth visit, the business must eventually depend on food quality, value, consistency, and service. People may pay a high price once for novelty. They are much less likely to pay forever for the exact same performance. At the same time, it would be unfair to dismiss Salt Bae's early success simply because of his later controversies. A boy who left school at 13 and began as a butcher's apprentice managed to build an internationally recognized restaurant brand with little more than a knife, a camera, and one unforgettable gesture. That is an extraordinary commercial achievement. He understood the rules of the short video era earlier than many traditional chefs. He understood that technical skill might be difficult for ordinary viewers to recognize, but a visual symbol could be understood instantly. He knew that a piece of beef might not become a global headline, but a dramatic performance could. He also helped demonstrate that, in the social media era, food does not only need to taste good, it needs to look worth recording. But his later controversies revealed the other side of the same instinct. When someone becomes too accustomed to being the center of attention, they may lose the ability to recognize when the spotlight belongs to someone else. In the beginning, Salt Bae bent his arm and sprinkled salt over a steak, and the entire internet copied him. Years later, he stood beside World Cup champions and performed the same gesture, and millions of people asked, why is he even there? The instinct that took him to the top was the same instinct that eventually damaged his image. It was an almost automatic hunger for the camera. That is why the true story of Salt Bae is not simply about an influencer who became famous and then completely collapsed. T is the story of an ordinary man who used attention to transform his life, but gradually began to confuse attention with status. Fame can make the entire world recognize your face. It does not mean that you naturally belong in every important moment. Social media can help turn an ordinary steak into a luxury product, but it cannot guarantee that customers will forever forget that. Underneath the gold and the performance, it is still just a piece of meat. One sprinkle of salt helped Nusret cross social classes and build a global restaurant empire. But his appearance at the World Cup offered a warning to every influencer. When the cameras have spent years following you, the hardest skill may no longer be learning how to attract more attention. It may be learning when to step out of the frame. That is all for today's episode. Do you see Salt Bae as a marketing genius who understood social media better than almost anyone else? Or do you think internet fame gradually caused him to lose his sense of boundaries? And at the right price, would you visit one of his restaurants just to experience it once? Let us know what you think in the comments. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next episode.